Hey guys and girls, Bored now back with you, and this is going to be my review of Child's Play, the original Chucky movie from 1988, and this is day 6 of my October horror marathon. It's actually going to go up a sort of a day later, a bit later than planned, so apologies for that, but it should quickly be followed by another review, so I'm getting them out pretty fast and may well have more than 31 over the course of the month. I won't promise that, but it could well happen. I'm going to try and pack them in. So this is going to be obviously a start of another franchise for me. And this sort of came about by accident tonight, actually, because I was hoping on rewatching the recent, or watching, sorry, for the first time, the recent Child's Play, the reboot from this year, which I still haven't seen, but that wasn't possible. It wasn't on Amazon as I thought it may have been. So I'm going to come back to that another time, but they had a few of the Child's Play movies, and I was there with Mum, and we wanted to watch something, so we said we'll jump in at the start again and go with the 1988 original. So this obviously is where it all started, and now we've got it's 8 movies now, including the recent sort of reboot slash remake. 7 that are in continuity. Although you've got 2 different sort of phases in a way. You've got the 3 original Child's Play movies, and then you've got they started being called Chucky something or other, which went in a different direction. But so yeah, I'm gonna go through all of them. I'm a pretty big fan of this franchise. Chucky, a really exciting, entertaining, distinct horror character, has a lot of fun and very malevolent, and it's always a blast watching the hell that he unleashes. So this original Child's Play movie is directed by Tom Holland, who had a little bit of horror pedigree. He directed I believe it's Prom Night, which was also in the 80s. And he, obviously stayed mostly in horror. He directed The Thinner, which is based on a Stephen King novel. Sort of not really had a remarkable career, but, has made some solid films. He's kind of, solid director without his direction ever sort of stand out, but he directs it. But crucially, it is the creation, the brainchild of Don Mancini, and Mancini has stayed with the franchise all the way through, pretty much. So I think it's his writing and his idea for the Chucky character which is sort of crucial. And I'm going to get into the sequels, obviously, but I think it's his ideas and later when he took it in a different direction which has really sustained the character and given fans some really exciting films along the way. So Don Mancini writes this, and obviously we get the doll created and designed by Michael Kissner, I believe his name is. So we have Brad Dourif famously voicing Chucky. Brad Dourif's really great character actor. He had already made somewhat of a name for himself before this film. He was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, really had a sort of quite a big part in that. Certainly his scene at the end of that film really stands out to a lot of people. Really, so he has impressed in dramatic roles as well. He was also in Mississippi Burning. But I guess since Child's Play really put him on the map and really made him a mainstream name, I think since then he has kind of been a bit pigeonholed in like horror or genre type films, sci-fi. Not that there's anything wrong with that, and I think he's always impressive when he has shown up. It's just, I think he's become a bit like Tony Todd in the sense that sometimes he will just be, he'll be offered all this money to appear in these films, and it'll be often lesser films where they just want his name on the poster sort of thing. And so it has become a bit of a curse in itself, speaking of the Chucky side of things. But, obviously he's so brilliant as Chucky, and he clearly enjoys it because he keeps coming back. And we have Andy, the little boy, and obviously his mother, played by Catherine Hicks, who I think does a really solid job in the movie. So, of course, if you don't know, it's Andy's birthday, 8-year-old Andy, and he's desperate for a good guy doll, as they've been sort of called, and his mother finally gets him one, but lo and behold, it's a doll which has been incorporated the spirit of this serial killer, this Charles Lee Ray, who was killed, and we see him being killed at the start of the film by Chris Sarandon's character. He's a detective, and we see a chase out and a shootout between them at the start, and he is killed by him, but he at the same time is using this spell to transport his body into the doll, essentially, or something goes wrong anyway, and he ends up in the doll. And that's how Chucky is born. That's how the cat is born. So at first things seem normal when Andy gets Chucky for his birthday. He's very happy. Slowly things start going wrong. Things start to unravel, and it is obviously Andy. He sort of knows what's going on because Chucky talks to him, and Andy, being very timid 8-year-old, is too afraid to really go against Chucky, although he does try and speak out. And obviously, as is a horror convention, the parents don't, or his mother and the police don't believe Andy, and slowly things come out. And there's quite a nice little mystery to it, and not a nice sort of plot that unfolds, where things eventually fall into place and we find out exactly how things have happened and what Chucky is trying to do, essentially. So I will get into spoilers, and my verdict on the film is that it's a really solid film. I don't think it's the best of these films, but I do think as a way to introduce the character, it does a good job. Obviously, I think this film is different from most of the other Chucky films in the sense that it's quite low key at times, although there are more dramatic moments. But I think you do get a build up where it's working its way up to revealing Chucky, revealing him in his killer form, if you like, as the doll. So it cuts around that a lot, and you'll have like little things like Andy sort of talk, like whispering to Chucky, Chucky whispering to him, and it's all done in a way that makes it look like it's just a kid with his doll sort of thing. And things will happen, and you just get little hints that Chucky is alive and doing these things. You don't actually see it, or you don't have to actually see him alive until quite far into the film. So I think with this being the first film, they sort of felt they had to do that to really keep the mystique, keep the horror element. I mean, I'm guessing going in, people would have known, and that was what the film was anyway. I would think so. Because normally at least that the basic sort of setup, which that is. But even so, it's a good rule of horror to try and disguise and try and build up to the reveal of the monster. And I think they could only really get away with it in this film. I think after this, once they got sequels, they had to really go with it from the start of the film. They had to really play up to the conceit and then just have some fun with it, because obviously there's a lot of fun to be had with the Chucky character. But they do a good job of this, of slowly building up tension. It's quite a nice pace film. And I think Holland does some decent work, in the set pieces and certain creepy scenes. Has a nice touch when it comes to atmosphere, but I don't think his direction is great. I don't think there's anything that special in it. I think it is more the script, which is nicely paced, and it's more about the characters, and I think they get the casting really, really well. I think Andy, the young actor playing him, is really natural. I mean, obviously the boy himself is obviously the age he's meant to be, the same age as Andy, so I think that plays a part. And I think Catherine Hicks is really convincing as the mother. I think you really feel her sort of torment and confliction, and I think at various times, like when she's desperate to get this toy for her son, she wants to make him happy. That's relatable as a parent. You do want to see your child happy, or you just want to do things, especially when it's their birthday, to really please them. And then at other times you see her desperation, and I think she really plays it well. It's a really balanced performance, when obviously for a while she doesn't believe Andy, and then how it slowly dawns on her. And some of the scenes with Chucky. So I think she does a really good job. I think Chris Sarandon he feels an odd choice for his role as the detective. Just because he just seems like that sort of character who maybe you would think would be a bit more slimy, a bit more slick, because he does have this quite sort of roguish sort of appearance, but he's fine in the role. And I mean, one thing I like about his character actually is that I think a lot of times in these films, because obviously he has a lot of interactions with the mother, and he takes an interest in the case. I mean, it's his case, and obviously there's the backstory with him and Chucky, or Charles Lee Ray, I should say. But obviously at first he thinks Andy's obviously, no, this isn't true. And then when the mother tries to convince him later, he thinks she's crazy and he doesn't want to hear it. But what I sort of like about the character is the fact that there's no sort of love interest feel to him. There's no hint at a romance between him and the mother. Karen, her name is. I thought they might be going that way at first, because I just sort of thought I picked up a bit of a flirting thing from him, I think, when he's first at the apartment, but they sort of move away from that. So I think that's refreshing, because a lot of times in this film there would be that sort of element to the relationship. So it's good they didn't do that, I think. So I think the film works best when you get the low-key scenes and the build-up to what's actually happening. So I think there are certain scenes that are a bit, maybe it goes to the other extreme. And I mean, I think when it does it with Chucky, I think they mostly get away with it and it ends up being quite good fun. But I think the scene at the start, the sort of shootout scene when the cop is chasing Charles Lee Ray through the store and they're shooting at each other, and you get the whole magic and the electricity. Some of that stuff is a bit too melodramatic. I think that takes me out of the film a little bit too much. So I think there are some dated elements to the film, because you get the whole voodoo storyline. It's revealed then the whole spell came from this voodoo magic, and there's a character which we see later um, who Charles Lee Ray got the spell from him, and he finds out, he wants to find out how to get back into human form. So the guy sort of tells him it has to be the first person you came in contact with as a doll. And actually that's a slight continuity error. Unless... no, I think it might have been the first person he told or spoke to as a doll, I think. So it's Andy, but I thought for a moment it might have been the mother, if it was just... But I think it's the first person he spoke to or told that he was alive, sort of thing. So it's Andy. So that's kind of the twist, and he goes after Andy at the end of the film because he has to essentially kill Andy for the spell to be reversed, and he'll go into Andy's body. So there's this guy who he got the spell off. So there's this whole voodoo plot. So stuff like that, I think when you watch the film now, it feels very hokey. It feels quite dated. There are certain moments like that, not many, but just certain moments that date it a little bit. Although that's actually quite an effective little kill, because he gets a voodoo doll and he starts stabbing it and killing that guy. Again, it's quite hokey, but it's quite good fun. I think it's the sort of thing Chucky would do. I think it's quite malevolent, and he's enjoying the torture aspect. So I think another good thing about the film is the fact that it's the New York of the 80s. It has that really downbeat, grimy sort of tone to it. And that works really well. I think as a character in the film, the city and the mood of it makes for a better sort of tone, a more effective tone for a horror movie. And there's just something quite distinct about that feel, and it works so much better for a horror movie than maybe the sort of clean-cut, pretty-looking New York you might get in a lot of films today. And again, they probably go a bit over the board with it. I mean, I know when Karen is looking for the guy who sold her the doll, and that it's the wrong part of town, and all these sort of scary faces, and it's all very overwhelming. It's quite well done, but it's maybe a bit overdone as well. But I do like that style for this film, and I do have a lot of nostalgia for films that sort of look like that from the 80s. And I think what ultimately makes the film so effective in what it builds to, and what we finally get at the end with Chucky and the kills in the film, and obviously the big showdown at the end, then I think obviously the concept of the film is then it's taken something very childlike, very playful, very innocent, like obviously a boy and his sort of doll and toys and what have you, and it's obviously putting this dark, sinister twist on it. And so it, like in the early part of the film, they do a good job of having this very innocent, playful relationship with the mother and Andy, and the start of their day, and building up to getting the doll. So we get Andy, it's his birthday, trying to make her breakfast. He obviously spills all the cereal, just loads the cereal into the bowl, loads of sugar. It's overflowing, and he's making a real mess of this breakfast, but it's a whole thing, and we get this sense of energy, this youthful excitement from Andy. And so I think you really get that sense of, as I said, excitement, energy, and this innocence, this real playful innocence. So it really takes a bit of time setting up the character of Andy and his mother Karen, and so that makes it more effective later when they're put in danger and when Chucky starts coming alive and the whole thing. So I think it's a good little setup, and I think they're quite well written characters. I think you are invested in them. And there's some quite playful humour as well. I quite like the stuff at the department store. I think Karen's boss is a real sort of 80s sort of dweeb. He's the sort of character you see a lot in 80s movies. This real square, this real sort of bully, because she's trying to, she's, I can't remember where she wants to go, but I think she she wants to go out somewhere else. I can't remember, but it's obviously the night she leaves Andy with her best friend, and things start to escalate for the first time. But anyway, the boss is being a real dick about it, and there's some good sort of banter with that. I sort of like her best friend who works at the store, the way she really gives the boss some stick, and it sort of feels a bit unrealistic, like the way they talk to the boss. I think in reality, I mean, I'm sure it does happen, but I think mostly people would be too wary of losing their jobs. I mean, unless it was the sort of thing where it was just done in banter, with the boss. Like you got on with the boss and you just had this banter back and forth. But I think this is obviously it's a bit more meant. It is banter, but it's like she's sticking it to the boss sort of thing. And the boss obviously doesn't find it funny, but there's some good banter back and forth, and I really like the best friend quite a lot, the way she sticks it to the boss. There's a funny line because she says she'll look after Andy, and she says, "Hey, it's the best day I've had in months," and the boss sarcastically says, "I can't imagine why that would be." So yeah, I quite enjoy some of that stuff. Some of it just feels like these sort of innocent 80s sort of characters you got a lot during this time, and it's good fun. It does make you nostalgic for those times. So yeah, I should talk about the kills a bit and the handling of the reveal, which I think is handled pretty well. And the kills I do enjoy. I think there's obviously a bit of a problem with this setup, where obviously it's, I think, that's partly why they keep it under wraps for so long, because it's kind of hard to make look convincing, and if he was running around all the time and going after people, yeah, credibility would be stretched. But I think the kills are well done, and there's enough credibility to them. So I mean, you get the bit with the friend, and obviously Andy and Chucky have been taken to bed, and then Chucky reappears in front of the TV, puts it on. Obviously the friend thinks it's Andy, and it slowly builds, and eventually, because there's a fake out with the telephone when the mother's calling to check on him, and so Andy, smacks him. Or not Andy, sorry, Chucky eventually smacks her with the hammer, goes after her. And the only side is, then it's a bit telegraphed. She, literally sort of throws herself through the window. Or obviously she doesn't, but it looks like that way. It's a bit a bit of a stretch maybe to think that Chucky could hit her with that much force, the way she flies through the window to her death. But it's a good kill though. It's well handled, and it's another interesting thing actually, because throughout the film we see Chucky sort of moving about and dodging things quite, with quite a lot of ease, and we see him really be aggressive and really wrestling with people, and it's sort of thing you wonder. I mean, obviously being in doll form, would he have that much strength? But I guess I partly retcon it as then because he's Charles Lee Ray in the body of the doll, then I think perhaps the doll would incorporate his strength sort of thing, so it would be the strength of Charles Lee Ray almost, just in doll form. I'm not too sure anyway, but that's kind of the way I choose to see it a bit. But anyway, that's a good kill. I quite like the one with the voodoo doll. There's a couple that aren't so great, but I think there are some. The kills are pretty well done. They're pretty handled in the way they protect Chucky. I think probably my favourite scene of the whole film is the reveal. Well, the reveal for the mother that Chucky is actually alive, and so it's after she's agreed to leave Andy with like a psychologist at the police station, because things have escalated and there's been another person killed. It's like Charles Lee Ray's old, buddy, essentially, crime partner. He's been killed. So things are starting to build up, and obviously Andy is trying to tell them what's going on, and they're just not buying it. So Karen has left Andy with a therapist, and she actually brings Chucky home. And obviously we know what's going on, but I think what's great is the little detail of how it's revealed to Karen, and that is that there's no batteries in Chucky. So she's looking at the box that the doll came in, and she sees batteries. Well, they should be in Chucky, of course, and it says batteries included. So that really sort of unnerves her, and that's a real light bulb sort of moment. And I think it's just a nice little touch, because you know at some point she's gonna figure the whole thing out. But it's a clever way to reveal it, and I think the scene really plays out nicely. And obviously she slowly goes over to Chucky, and that's when it just unfolds. And I think the psychology of it is really well handled and quite believable, the way she just unravels. I think that's one of the good things about Hicks's performance, is you really get the sense of hysteria, because there's a moment where she just like shouts at the doll, just shakes it, and it's kind of this sense of hysteria, because then she laughs afterwards really hysterically, and it's very realistic, because she's thinking for a moment, well, is Andy telling the truth? Would he really make this up? And then, it's that moment where she thinks, no, of course not, and just, where she's really starting to question her own sanity. So I think she's really good, and there's a lot of like believability in the psychology of the moment. But then, of course, Chucky comes alive, starts attacking her when she starts, because she shakes it. And it's actually a clever little test she does, where she starts putting him in the fire and threatens to light him on fire unless he reveals himself. And that's when he comes alive and starts calling her a bitch and going crazy and bites into her neck. And there's this whole sort of struggle, and It's a great scene. I think it's probably my favourite scene of the film, and I think considering the era they were in, I think the animatronics of the doll are well done as well. I liked how they did that, and Brad Dourif just so great. He just brings this manic, insane energy to Chucky, and the voice is one of the great horror voices, and the evil laugh we hear later. And I think that's one of the cool things about how they slowly work up to him is you slowly get the full blown Chucky. So in the scene with the Chris Sarandon character in the car, when Chucky attacks him because it's he's the one who shot him, so obviously he's going for revenge against him. So there's this whole thing in the back of the car when he sneaks up on him and they start fighting and wrestling, and it's in that scene you actually hear Chucky's laugh for the first time, which this evil sort of cackle which everyone knows now. So that's a great moment, and that's a fun little scene because you have him trying to drive the car, and at the same time Chucky's like stabbing at him from under the seat, and it's again very farcical. You do get some farcical scenes in this film, but I think they are played up for a lot of fun. So that one I enjoyed with the knife coming through the seat and him trying to dodge it and trying to drive at the same time. So that's a fun little scene, and it's quite claustrophobic as well because when the car sort of flips over, you get him like in upside down in the car, and Chucky keeps appearing at random moments, and he starts shooting at him, and he dodges and various things. So yeah, it's some good fun set pieces, I think, and some creepy moments. And the very end, when it just sort of goes bananas, where you get the final scene in the apartment. And you do get some fun lines in the film, like obviously this is the end, friend, when Andy burns him. It's sort of fitting, then it's Andy who burns him, and obviously Chucky says we're friends to the end, and he says this is the end, friend, and the match, and it's a great sort of kicker. It feels a bit like an action type line, and the ending does feel like an action film in some ways, so back and forth. But there's a couple of times where you think Chucky's dead and he's not. And I think this is to do with them not being sure if they would get a sequel. So they wanted, A, this big final battle, but B, to maybe kill Chucky off on the chance, or at least appear that he's been killed off for good, on the chance there wasn't a sequel. But because the film builds to it quite nicely, then this scene is the payoff, and you don't mind, and it's very in your face, and there's a lot of. Then it sort of goes on a while, and there's lots of different turns, but it really gives you value for money, I think, at the end of the film. So yeah, I don't think anyone's really complaining. It's all pretty tense and well done, and good fun as well. So the ending of the film, I think, is very satisfying, and I love the last little shot where they finally have killed Chucky, and Andy, the mother sort of calls him away and says, we're going to the hospital, and then the last shot of the film is just Andy peering round the door, just checking to see if Chucky's finally dead. So it's a nice little shot, the shot of Andy looking around the door. So that is the first Child's Play, and overall I'm very positive on it. I think this time I noticed some stuff that does date it a bit, but I still really like it. I still think it's very solid, and I guess it's well cast. I think for this this first film they maybe got away with playing with it a bit more and not revealing Chucky till quite late into the film. Whereas I think after this, the cat's out of the bag and they couldn't do that so much. But it's a great introduction to the character. There's some good kills and a decent sort of atmosphere. So overall, I think it's a good start to the franchise. Probably not the best. I think there have been better films along the way, and I'll talk about those later on. But I'm going to give Child's Play, the original Child's Play, 7.5 out of 10. A very strong start to the series. So let me know your thoughts of the film in the comments below, and I'll be back with another horror movie review soon. Goodbye.